All right, now we're going to start with genre and Luminism. And the first artist we're going to talk about is William Sidney Mount. He was from a farming family on Long Island in Setauket, and also in Stony Brook. His home in Stony Brook, by the way, is now a museum. He was trained by his brother to be a sign painter, but in 1826 he went to the National Academy of Design, which was the first actual school for artists in New York City. And as a matter of fact, one of the vice presidents was a man by the name of William Dunlap. Now, I think some of you are familiar with him because he was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and did the first live drawing of George Washington. And that painting today hangs in the rotunda of the White House, or of the Congress. Okay, and fortunately, when the terrible thing happened on January 6th, that was the oldest painting, and it was in another room. It was in one of the conference rooms, so that painting was not disturbed in any way. All right, now, so we went to the school at the National Academy of Design, which actually just closed about maybe 15, 20 years ago. They closed their building, and unfortunately, and all the artworks were removed. Now, in 1827, he went home, and by 1828, he was doing local portraits. He had his own studio in 1829. He had his own studio at 154 Nassau Street in New York. He painted, again, history paintings and portraits. By 1830, however, he returned to his roots in Stony Brook, where he said, "We had enough materials at home to make original paintings." Now, the Metropolitan Museum has called him the most important genre painter of the 19th century because he was to influence other genre painters that came after him. All right? The first one is The Power of Music. And the date on this is 1847. One of William Sidney Mount's most famous images. Music attracted even a workman passing by. The raked shadows frame the black man whose smile indicates he is charmed by what he hears. With Mount, you are going to see a lot of this push-pull composition. That is to say, deep space in a barn, but someone standing outside. It's kind of a push-pull, all right? The black man is framed by the door, and the people inside are framed by the actual framework of the barn. Now, the deep recession, again, was common with him. And again, the power of music, and they were a fiddler and another person making music. Now, you're going to see a number of black people in his paintings. I personally think there must have been a number of freed slaves in Long Island at this time. Now, that man, well, not dressed in a suit, in a tuxedo, is certainly well dressed enough. He's wearing a tie, he's wearing an overcoat and whatnot, which indicates to me he's simply maybe a farmer or something just passing by and decides to listen to the music. And I do not believe that he is a slave. Okay, from what and the other paintings I'm going to show you also indicate that these were local people, probably freed slaves who had come north and continue to live there. All right, now, let me see. Eel spearing at Setauket in 1845. This is a marvel of reflection and composition. Add the social implications, you have a very unique focus. First of all, the white boy is guiding the skiff along the river or the stream as the black woman fishes. Now, she may very well have been the family cook, And so then they had a boat, and so the boy is doing with the skiff. Now, notice the beautiful patterns that are set up by the boys rowing, and how the reflections are in the water, and even her pole there also. And if you can see the landscape behind them kind of goes with them and kind of falls off, doesn't it? And that also is reflected in the water. So they're beautiful reflections, and the painting is absolutely marvelous. It was considered, and is considered, a very, very important painting in Mount's work. Now the next one is called Cider Making in 1840. Now, this cider mill stood in Long Island until the beginning of the 20th century, when they knocked it down. And that's a shame, because it would have been a lovely thing to see. How do you make cider? I mean, I don't know if anybody here knows how to make cider. I don't. But, I mean, you could have possibly, if you had kept this, you could have shown it to today's, the people from today, and shown what they did. Now, the cider mill, as I said, it shows the 19th century technology and also local workers. But there were political implications in this painting. In 1840, the election of William Harrison was during his campaign for president, he emphasized that he was from a log cabin, and what they served was hard cider, which of course is makes you a little bit tippling. Now, the cider was given out at his rallies, so that if you came to one of his rallies, you'd get a cup of cider. All right. Now, Mount himself was a Whig, and the election was to defeat the Jacksonian policies that destroyed our banking system. In the 1840s, we had a serious bank problem, and cider was popular anyway, and probably was a way to use up the apple crop before it got rotten. Now, apples were also preserved by letting them dry. Now, I don't know, because apples do have a lot of water in it. So I don't know how they dried it. Maybe they just, again, I don't know. The process is lost to me, but it would be a way of keeping the apples so that you can eat the apple in the winter, because there was very, very, very few fruits available in the winter. Now, by the way, on the barrel, there is the date of the painting, which is 1840. Brandon? Now, this is a very interesting painting called Long Island Farmhouses from 1862. Now, you've got to realize, by 1862, we are already in the Civil War, all right? Now, unfortunately, this painting, I would advise you when you go home to go on the Metropolitan Museum of Art website, because you can pull up this painting and look at it in high definition. What I'm going to point out to you here, you may not be able to see, but with the high definition, it is an absolutely fabulous painting. I got lost when I did it on high D. I got lost looking at it because it was that delightful. Now, this is the view from his portable studio on wheels. He had an actual studio, okay? The house in the front is the Roberts house, and in the background, the Roberts house is in the background, and the Brewster home is in the foreground. We know that he began this on November 26th in 1862 and finished it the following spring. Obviously, he kept it in notes in his diary, all right? Now, this is not a genre scene. Genre scenes are what I've shown you: the cider making, the eel spearing, and the power of music. Those are genre paintings, showing you everyday happenings. This, however, is not a genre scene, for there are very few ancillary figures in the painting. Now, there are some chickens there. There is an entire scene of chickens and turkeys. And if you look at the barn door, now I'm going to use I don't want to step off this thing because I don't want to land up falling. Now, if you look all the way on the right side, just beyond that tree, you will see a door with some children standing there, okay? And you can, again, magnify that, and you will actually see them there. Now, there was also a wash that's been hung out, and you can see that right there. And let me see. A man by the fence and a woman on a path in the back. There was also, at the very extreme right, a skiff going down the water, going down the river. So the tree in the foreground is leafing out with a robin on the tree. Now, as I said, the museum of the Metropolitan Museum has done it up with the where you could blow it up. Now, the ground is greening, and it indicates, and the long shadows suggests a spring morning, because as you can see, the grass is coming back, okay? Now, this one is called Dancing on the Barn Door. You see another musical painting. Barns were used as settings for many of his works, as I mentioned to you. Mount himself was musical. As a matter of fact, in the picture I showed you at the beginning, that's his self-portrait, and he's holding a flute or a recorder, whatever. And it looked like it's probably could possibly have been maybe a homemade one. All right, now. Mount was musical, and in 1852 he also patented a hollow-backed violin. So he was very, very musically inclined. Now, these two young people here are dancing on the barn floor. The woman stands open there's another woman standing in the background, opening the door and calling other people in. The shadows are reminiscent of the end of the day, but it is a joyous and bucolic scene. Women are rarely seen in Mount's works. They are normally ancillary figures and not part of the action. But there we see the action, and there is a fiddler, and there is the ever-present barn door, which obviously has got a lot of sun on it, and the couple dancing on the floor there. Next. Now this one is called Dance of the Haymakers from 1845. The workers at an impromptu jig. Now there was also here in the front a still life of ham, and a rake and a ham with a knife and a fork in it, so you can stop and have a piece of ham, and the onlookers. There were also onlookers in the loft. There's an onlooker right there, and there is a dog which has settled right in front. Likes the dog. The dog likes the music. Okay, and there's also a little black boy there who is kind of doing something on the barn door. Now, when you look at him, he's rather well dressed, isn't he? He's certainly not wearing rags. He's got a hat. He's got trousers and a jacket that fit him. So this indicates there must have been a small group of blacks who did quite well in Long Island at the time. So music can actually charm everybody, even the little dog sitting there. Next, Barron. All right, now this one is called The Card Players. Here is a decrepit barn. You can see that it's falling apart, all right. And two guys have sat down for a game of cards. Now, the barrel serves as a makeshift seat for that man, and I'm wondering if there isn't a play on the words over a barrel. Now, you know what an over the barrel means. Now, it does not look as if the gambling was common in the 19th century, okay? It doesn't look as if these men are cheating, but one doesn't know, all right? And that little thing about the barrel, him as a makeshift seat, well, maybe he's the one that's going over the barrel. All right, now, next one. Here are some more gamblers. They are called the truant gamblers, mischief makers in the barn setting about to be caught by none other than the farmer. And these boys probably haven't gone to school. They're playing hooky. Now, this painting was bought by a man named Lumen Reed. Lumen Reed was a very successful New York grocer. He had a lot of stores, okay? And he purchase Mount's paintings, and because he liked art. So in other words, that's the reason why these fellows worked there, because New York was becoming a center where people would buy the paintings, or they would ask you to come and paint their portrait or whatever. So that's the reason why. And the National Academy of Design was there, and none other than William Dunlap was one of the vice presidents of the National Academy of Design. He had already left Perth Amboy, or left New Jersey, actually, not just Perth Amboy, left Perth Amboy, and had gone into New York. Now, William Dunlap published in 1832 a book entitled The Arts of Early America, or something like that. Anyway, the book was printed in 1832, and believe it or not, the University of Illinois printed it up about 3 or 4 years ago. Now, why would they print up a book that had been published 200 years before? Well, it had a lot of very, very important information in it. It talks completely about the early arts in this country, not only the art of painting and drawing, but also the art of the theater, because William Dunlap also wrote plays in New York, and one of his first plays was one of the characters in the play was George Washington. And the theater, the play was presented in a theater in New York City, and believe it or not, Martha and George Washington came to one of the evening performances, and Washington had the fun of watching somebody play him on the stage. So, I mean, William Dunlap is really very, very important, although he's been forgotten. We know he's buried in Perth Amboy, but we don't exactly know where in Perth Amboy. So anyway, I'm trying to make him famous. I'm trying to, kind of like talk about him so that people become very, very, get knowledgeable about him. All right, now, Luman Reed, who bought this painting, said to Mount in 1835, "Your truth of expression and natural attitudes are to me perfectly delightful, and really everyday scenes where the picture tells the story and are the kinds most pleasing to me, and must be too to every true lover of art." So now this was one of his patrons. I'm going to talk about another patron too in a few minutes. All right, now change again. All right, now this is a painting that was owned by Luman Reed. All right, the seller here whittles. You see, he's whittling. He's thinking about, what am I going to sell this horse for? He's got a buyer there with a top hat who's ready to buy the horse. Now, the healthy glow of the animal means that he's probably in very good condition and can command a fine price. Now, a glimpse of the scene. This is a glimpse of something that we don't see anymore, horse trading. We don't see that. You see car trading, but you don't see horse trading. Okay. Now, the figures are set apart by a fence, and in the recession, I want you to look there on the roof of the next house. You will see a bird sitting there. Now, when I show you some other paintings by another artist that's coming up, you are going to see certain of Mount's things in the paintings of this artist. In other words, they borrow from each other, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, all right, so now the next one, please. Now, this is called the raffle, and the raffle is for a goose. Now, why would you want to raffle off a goose? Well, all right, let me give you a little. This scene was common at this time. Lotteries were popular. Lottery for anything and everything. And the goose is indicative of the food shortage in 1837 that led to food riots in New York City. Now, this painting was done in 1837, okay? There was an economic crisis. The Jacksonian, the way the Jacksonian government ran the government, there was a failure of the banks. The Bank of U.S., the United States, the Biddle Bank, all failed, and because of the Jackson's economic policies. Now, these people are very, very eager to place a bet or whatever for the goose. And the eagerness may reflect to the fact that many people left New York City and went to, let's say, Long Island, where their relatives were, because they would assume that they would have more food. There was simply no food or very little food. Now, the dead goose may also be symbolic of killing one that lays the golden egg. All right, so that's another way we can play this. Now, the group focuses on the goose with a circle of light around the table. The still life in the loft, there is a still life in the loft there, if you look up there, and indicates that the still life there indicates there may be living quarters or a place for immoral activity, because that happened in the lofts, okay? Now, the clothing they're wearing indicates both city and rural types. Okay, this man here in the foreground looks to be the one that brought the goose there. Okay, he's showing the goose to these guys. So he may have come from. He's rather well dressed. Maybe he came from somehow managed to get this goose. I don't know how. Now, I'm going to read to you what was happening in the time when this economic crisis and the food riots occurred. There was a man named Philip Hone in New York. He was also a very wealthy man, and he was the mayor of New York City. Now, at that time, New York City voted for their mayor every year, and Philip Hone was so popular that he got voted in 10 years straight. They liked him so much. The 11th year, they voted for somebody else, but the 12th year, they voted for Hone again. Now, he had a home in New York, and every Sunday, now this is something, every Sunday, he would open up the doors of the house, and even though you were a stranger, if you were from New York, you could go in and look at his artwork. Well, I mean, people were, shall we say, more genteel in those days. I don't think if you had an art collection, you would simply open it up and let anybody come in. But in those days, that's exactly what he did. Now, I'm going to also quote from one of his diaries. On February 28th in 1837, he wrote, "Never yet have I known a market so dear as the Fulton was this morning." Now, you know the Fulton Market. Okay. It had the appearance of famine, although Saturday, when the country always sends in its produce, there was plenty of beef at 18 cents per pound. But 18 cents would have been a lot of money in those days. Remember, we were still minting half pennies in 1837. You could buy something for a half of a penny. All right, now we've got to put this in the context. Today, 18 cents, we would laugh at it. But in those days, it was a completely different context. All right, now, 18 cents a pound. But of poultry and veal and such things, there did not appear to be a day's supply for the table of the City Hotel. There must have been a hotel called the City Hotel. What is to become of the laboring classes? He was enough of a person that sympathized with the people who simply could not afford the food at 18 cents a pound. All right, and that's the reason why they had so much beef there, because nobody was buying it at 18 cents a pound, right? All right, now, okay. Now, let's look at this. The bone player and the banjo player, both from 1856, mounted many paintings of musicians, both black and white. Blacks were not treated, he did not treat blacks as buffoons or in a subservient position. As you can see, they kind of have an equality, all right? Now, rather, they are performers dressed well-dressed in a appropriate costume. Now, these two paintings were very popular. As a matter of fact, the Bone Player was also sold as a lithograph in a full-color edition in 1857, and these two were done in 1856. So that one, the Bone Player, was so popular, they did a lithograph of it, and you could buy it and frame it. Now, I put two of these together because the theme is the same, and it's all kind of funny. It's called The Sportsman's Last Visit from 1835 and The Courtship from 1836. This is a favorite theme of many genre artists because of the humorous situation. The men are the caricatures here. The lady on the left here, the lady being wooed by the gentleman, while another suitor looks on totally befuddled, scratching his head, all right? It will be his last visit, no doubt, as he has lost to someone with a bit of polish. Now, she acts coy as she plays with her knitting. That may allude also to her behavior with these two men, all right? Now, let's look at the other one. Now, remember this, the other one. This is in a more humble home. The man is holding the yarn and the lady is turning it into a ball. Courtship in those days was sometimes called winding up. So that alludes to the fact that they are winding up and they will probably get married. Now, it's again, the winding up is a pun as the lady winds the yarn that her young man holds. It may also be that the winding refers to an impending marriage. In other words, they're winding things up and they're going to get married. Next, please. Now, he not only did caricatures and people having fun, but this is a very serious painting. It's the man the old man is named Zachariah Green. This is done in 1852. Now, by 1852, any survivors of the Revolution are beginning to get quite old, just as the survivors of World War II are getting very, very scant, and the survivors of the Holocaust, all right? And we are trying to get interviews with them so that they were the witnesses to this, and we want to get the interviews so that we know what actually happened. Now, this is the great-grandfather of those children. His name is Zachariah Green, and so this is actually taken from the notes, notes that the Metropolitan Museum had on it. Now, the great-grandfather's tale of talking to the children about his tale of the American Revolution. He was a reverend. Reverend Green is telling his great-grandchildren of the service as he points to a bust of George Washington. Now, busts of George Washington and pictures of George Washington were very, very common in the early 19th century to have in your home because he was treated almost like he was a saint. And when he died, there was such an outpouring of sorrow. According to what I have seen at Fraunces Tavern a number of years ago, when there's an upstairs for the Fraunces Tavern, and they had an exhibit of the art that came out when George Washington died. And it was amazing to see how much he was revered and almost deified after his death. So let me go back to this now. He's pointing to the bust of George Washington. The look of concern on the girl's face and comforting gesture must mean that he is telling of a sad and tragic accident, or incident, I should say. The older boy is taking notes. All right, you should record your history. He's taking notes about what is being said. Now, the little one, doesn't seem to understand it. So there is a range of emotions: sadness, empathy, and amazement. And this is the way you carry on your history. You carry on your individual history or your country's history by recording it. Now we're going to start talking about another man, Francis William Edmonds. This is done by Durand, another artist, a contemporary artist, who lived between 1806 and 1863. He was born in Hudson, New York. His father was a Revolutionary War general, politician, and was also attached to the state militia. he had an early interest in art that was fostered by none other than William Dunlap from Perth Amboy, New Jersey, who was the assistant paymaster to the militia in New York, because he had moved to New York. All right, remember I mentioned that to you. Now, in 1823, Edmonds decided to become a banker. So he was, in 1823, he was the cashier to the Hudson River Bank. Now, the cashier in those days would be the treasurer today and would place him only one step from the presidency of the bank. So he was very, very well educated and well informed, and also from all the other things I'm going to tell you, he was a man that could be trusted. Now, he returned in 1832. After spending 2 years at the Hudson Bank, he returned to New York City with his wife and his child. He went back to painting and exhibited under a pseudonym because he thought art would be too frivolous for a serious banker. So he took a pseudonym, and his paintings were well received, but they didn't know that it was the banker that was doing it, okay? In 1840, his wife dies, and he goes to Europe to see the Dutch genre paintings in the Netherlands, which were a serious influence upon the work of Sidney Mount. He returned to New York City and continued combining art and banking. He was the founder of the American Art Union, a manager of the National Academy of Design, where William Dunlap at that time was the vice president of the National Academy of Design. And he also organized in New York City what was called the New York Crystal Palace Exhibition. So I don't know where the Crystal Palace was. I really don't. I mean, I know where the Crystal Palace was in London, but I don't know where it was in New York. That's another historical thing that I'm going to have to try to figure out where it was. Now, he was a diversified investor, and he founded a banknote engraving firm that merged with the American banknote in 1860. Now, in those days, when you bought a share of stock, you got an engraved piece of paper saying that you own that stock. Today, you don't get stock papers like that anymore. It's all automatic. But these were always lovely, lovely bonds. In fact, sometimes they even took artwork from France, and they would superimpose that, put that on the stock paper. And I once went to an exhibition like that, and it was wonderful to look at these old banknotes. They were so beautifully done and so crisp and so clear. It was absolutely marvelous what they could do then in the 19th century. In 1863, he died of a heart attack. Next, please. Now, many of his artworks are very timely, but sometimes they're very funny. Now, this is called Taking the Census from 1854. Now, the first census done in this country was done in 1850. So it was, now here is the family humor scene where the father is trying earnestly to count his children, their ages, and their ages, while the kids in the back are giggling, all right? Now, there is a picture of George Washington directly above the father's head. In other words, I cannot tell a lie. So that's why he's counting this one. I'm not sure if she's 6 or 7, but I'll look it up, And the kids are all laughing there, and the mother's holding the baby. And there is also a hat and a few other little things on the floor. That comes from the time he went to Holland to look at the Dutch art, because sometimes you will see things on the floor, just left quite casually on the floor in a painting of Dutch art. We go to the Metropolitan, you'll see some lovely Dutch artwork from the 16th century. So now also, the family is standing by the fireplace. The fireplace at that time was the heart of the home, because that's where the heat was. You would also have some light coming from the fire, but also it was like where the family would gather. But I also want you to notice next to that, on the mantle, there is a clock. No, it doesn't look, it's just a clock, Mary Ann, you know. Well, in those days, that was considered quite a treasure because you had a clock that told the time. You didn't have to go out and try to figure if it was 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock. You had a clock. Now, I remember reading about Pissarro, the artist, who had to flee his home during the Franco-Prussian War. And his wife got a letter from one of the neighbors saying that she had managed to save some of the paintings and also the family clock. In other words, this was a very, very valuable thing. And that's the reason why it's on the mantle like that. I wanted to point this out to you, you know, because we said it's a clock, so what? But that was much more important than, that would, to them, maybe would be like our iPhones, okay? All right, now, I don't want to, all right, now, let's go on. Here, all talk and no work in 1855. This rural farm scene is based on Mount because you can see again the open barn door, and there's another door in the back which reveals a meadow. Now, the light frames the two figures and leads our eye to the open window because you've got this diagonal line of light that goes right to the window. All right. Now, the white man and the black man are talking with each other. They are both wearing hats. The black man has a red tie on. All right. So one gets the impression that they are equals, and that man is certainly not a slave. Certainly not. And because he's talking and the man is listening, he's leaning on the, I think he's got a hoe or something, or he's leaning on it, and the guy is gesturing with him. So it's just now that's a typical genre painting. Catching the meeting of two neighbors who are discussing what happened yesterday, and it's caught there for us. Now here is one called The Speculator, and this has got a little bit of a clue in it. One look, we see the city slicker trying to sell the country bumpkins a bill of goods. He holds a paper which says on it, 1,000 valuable lots on Railroad Avenue. Well, you know they're being railroaded, don't you? And you know what that means. Even in those days, that meant what it means today. You're being railroaded. No, today we say you're being scammed, right? You're being scammed. All right. Now, and this couple looks like, well, they're a farm people, and of course, look, they've also got the fireplace there, and there's a picture above the fireplace, but I don't see a clock. There is no clock. Okay. But he's shucking corn, so obviously he's had a pretty good harvest, and maybe the guy saw him harvesting all his food and he figured he could get some money from him, all right? Now, the couple, he supposedly is the representative of a building association, all right? But they are skeptical. They're both looking, but they're very skeptical. And I wonder whether or not they fell for his line, shall we say. Because the Railroad Avenue, as I said, is a clue to the fact that he's railroading the couple. Now again, here we see the influence of Dutch genre in the earth tones, a lot of browns and golds in the earth tones, the still life on the floor of the corn, and there's also something right here, it looks like a cabbage, and also a jug, it looks like a jug of maybe whiskey, all right? And also with the Dutch painting, the light comes in from the left. Okay? So we see that in many of these paintings there are little jokes, and you really have to kind of parse them. You have to look at them and you have to parse them because there are little clues as to what it's all about. Next one. All right. The Image Peddler. In 1844. Now, this was a common sight in rural America. The peddler would go from house to house selling things such as, let's say, you need a wash tub, or you need a hoe, or you need a rake or something. There was no such place as going to the hardware store. because there were no hardware stores, okay? Now, they bought necessities and news as well. So people welcomed these peddlers because he would tell them, in the next village they're having a real bad problem. They're getting a lot of measles there, or something like that, which is might possibly have been because, again, there was no such thing as inoculations. Now, we all know about the outbreak of measles in West Texas, don't we? Sure. It's over 125 people, 125 children that have gotten it. And we get our messages, well, instantaneously as it happens. So this is the way that people got news when these peddlers went from village to village. Now, he brought the necessities and news as well. Edmonds recorded that he did all of the figures and objects from life. There were 3 generations in this painting. The grandfather is pointing to George Washington, right? There he is with the little child, and he's showing the bust of, again, George Washington. And then the little boy, there's a little boy there with a drum, drumming like they had done during the Revolution. And we also see, again, the Dutch influence. The light is coming in from the left. There are varying shades of brown and gold and tan as the shaft of light comes in. And the peddler even has some things on his head which look to be like little porcelain knickknacks. Now, that would have been something that we would like to have, because if you had a porcelain teapot or a porcelain knickknack, that automatically placed you as being a very genteel person. Okay, you had porcelain, and of course the porcelain could break, but having a teapot, an actual china teapot, would have placed you in an upper, it's what you got rather than what you are. Okay, now. And you notice that in the background there is a maid who is kind of listening at the door. She's doing the dishes or doing something there, but she's kind of listening, and everybody is gathered around the peddler, and it's quite a mob. And it actually what he creates is a triangular with the what has on his head as the apex, and all the other figures are around it. Next, please. Now, this one is a little different. It's from 1858. It's humorous and moralizing as well. The young woman shows off a bonnet as her parents peruse the bill, okay? Frugality reigns. The father and mother are looking at this bill, and this hat, it cost 50 cents. Oh, my God, what is she doing? Okay, but she's there in the middle. She's right in the middle, okay? Again, right by the fireplace, as we said, and parents are going to have to pay the bill. Now, the father looks to be like he's kind of old. Either he's in his dotage or he's a little bit drunk, and the mirror on the wall suggests the vanity of the mother and the daughter. Now, there was also, as you can see, a still life on the floor there of pumpkins and what looks like turnips and other things. And the fireplace isn't lit, but the door is wide open, which indicates it must be like summertime or springtime, okay? Now, also the family dog has walked over to the little girl and is sniffing around. Look at the beautiful box that the hat has come in. It's like a satin box, and it's all lined, and she's reveling in having this beautiful bonnet. But when I look at the little girl, I get a different feeling. First of all, she looks rather shy. She looks a bit scared, and she's obviously poor because her coat, well, she's got a coat on, but it looks like it doesn't quite fit her, doesn't it? It doesn't come together. So in other words, she must be quite poor. And she's tiny, and she's wearing shoes, of course, and it's obviously with the door open. She's framed in the door, just the way the Dutch would do it. Okay, she's framed in the door there. But I get the distinct impression that she's quite poor. And when I looked at that, I said to myself, well, why isn't that kid in school? Now, this may be a Saturday. I don't know what day this was. It's because it's totally imaginary. But when I look at her clothing and I look at how very shy she is, and I realize that she might be quite poor. And I'm wondering if they would give her a penny for bringing the hat. You be the judge of that, okay? All right. Now, okay, next, please. Here is the flute. Again, the influence of Mount on the music. This is 1859. This man entertains two little boys. Their clothing, while patched, indicates they are children of free blacks. They're not working in the fields. They've come to this man's house, and there's a jug on a nail. That's another Dutch idea. And also notice that the raked light coming in, and we can also see beyond the door there that there is another house across the road, if there is a road across. Okay, now. Let me see now. The basket is also used as a makeshift something to sit on, just like the barrel for the gamblers, okay? But again, it's just a piece of everyday happenings. These little boys walked by, maybe they heard the sound and they knocked on the door and he said, come in and I'll play for you. That's probably what happened, okay? But as I said, these children were quite well dressed. So there must have been a very viable black community there, because they're in so many of the paintings that they must have been there. Now, okay, the next, please. The sigh grinder. Now, this farmer enlists the help of a black child. Obviously, the child has to turn the wheel while he tries to sharpen up his sigh, or I think a sigh or a knife there, okay? And they're both equally dressed. I mean, they're both wearing black pants, and they both have a white shirt and the suspenders. So one indicates maybe it was just the neighbor's kid that he called over and said, would you do this for me? And so this is the kind of genre I'm talking about. Everyday events with people meeting each other and it being captured by an artist. Now, I want you to also look in the back where that steeple is. On the edge of the roof, there are birds. Remember the birds I pointed out on the edge of the roof with the painting of the horse trader? Okay, well, this is where the Mount's influenced other artists, and he's using that. All right. All right. Next, please. Now here's another funny one called The Bashful Cousin from 1852. There is an eager girl and a very reluctant suitor right in the middle of the painting. Okay. Now look at the dog. The dog is slinking off. He is reflecting the emotions of the man who is trying very hard to get out of that house. Okay? Now, in the back, the mother tries to, she's pointing, and she tries to enlist the help of the father. But he is totally oblivious because he's seen it all before. So that's why. And the scene, however, is witnessed by a black servant in the back, and you can see she's framed by the window there. But the mother is exhorting the father to please stop him. And, well, he's very quietly leaving and maybe taking the dog with him. Maybe that is his dog, and the dog is slinking out. Okay. So again, it's meant to be humorous. It's just a cute. And of course, we also see the influence of the Dutch with that window, the window bringing the light in right above their heads. Okay, next, please. Now, this is called sparking. Now, when a couple was dating, or not dating, but, They called it sparking when they would meet, and he might come into the house and call. Now notice that the door is open, because no decent lady in those days would be with a man in a room and the closed door, because that was a definite no-no, okay? So that's why the door is open, and he is sitting, and she's playing with her yarn, again, winding up, okay? And there was even a potato on the floor, another Dutch potato has rolled in and it's on the floor. And now, I have some information on this. Where did I put the information? Oh, I thought I had taken it. Now, here it is. There was something about this painting that I want to tell you. Edmonds painted his own face as the man and painted his wife, who was to die in 1840, as the lady. And this may be a tribute to her. Now, let's see now. All right, here it is. Oops, let's end the life of, wait a minute now. Wait a minute, I'm trying to get to this. All right. Mounted incidents of his life and used his family for models. A descendant of Edmonds states in a letter that she wrote in 1920 to the library of the New York Public Library, that the mother in Sparking was his mother, and the girl being courted was his first wife, and his face is actually what he painted. So it was so that we have definite evidence that that is the way they looked. Okay, and again, it was typical of that day, but they called it sparking, and when things were sparking, it was just about pretty sure that you were going to marry that person, and indeed he did marry her. Next, please. Now, I'm moving along to John Caleb Bingham. Now, we're leaving New York, and we are basically going to the frontier. The frontier being the Mississippi River, because beyond that, it was even in 1852, this is 1851, it would still have been wild territory, and we were still fighting the Indian Wars, and the Indian Wars would get worse, as you know. He was born in Virginia in 1811 and moved to Missouri when he was a child. He had an early talent, but he was forced to farm after his father died. If your father died, you had to take over the family and make money for the family. In 1838, however, he was lucky enough to go to the Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts to study, and being taught by John Nagel, who was another well-known artist, who was also a well-known artist who had been taught by Gilbert Stuart, no less, because Gilbert Stuart did spend a lot of time in Philadelphia. So he was studying with the man that studied with Gilbert Stuart. Now, he saw the works of other artists such as Sully and Cole, and in 1844 began a series of Missouri painting portraits. And also in the 1840s, he did a lot of river scenes, the river scenes of floating down the Mississippi, which are considered his best works. Elected to the Missouri legislature, he also did genre works of electioneering. He regularly sent works to the National Academy of Design and the American Art Union in New York City. He also went to Paris and Dusseldorf in 1856. Now, if you were an artist in the 1850s, you would make sure you got yourself to Paris, and you also got to Dusseldorf, Germany, which was one of the centers of European art at the time. Not anymore, but I don't think so. Anyway, I don't hear anything about Dusseldorf. But if you were a serious artist, you would go to Europe because you could absorb so much from Paris and also from Dusseldorf. Okay, next, please. Now, this is probably one of his most famous painting, all right? It's an imaginary scene, All right? No, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. 1846. These scenes were to disappear from the rivers. Indeed, much of the goods from the Midwest moved down the Erie Canal and got to New York much faster, okay? The Erie Canal having been built in the 1830s. But in this painting, the viewer is placed squarely in front of the figures, which actually form a pyramid, okay? And there is also some steps. If you were in front of that, you could climb the steps and join the group if you wanted. Now, this is a bunch of exuberant laborers, which would be equal to construction workers of today. One of them, the man is dancing, and the others are watching him. And one of them, I think, is playing the flute. So they are all having a good time as they, well, go slowly down the river. Now, and the rung of the ladder invites us to join them. And you also can see in the background the mist that's rising from the water indicates that this is the morning, because that's when the air absorbs some of the mist and you get almost like a haze. So he was very, very skillful at painting that hazy look. Next one, please. Now this one, the boatman of the Missis Missouri and the boatman on the Missouri from 1846. Now, I'm sorry, this is the boatman of the Missouri. All right, I'm going to make sure I get my one right. Now, one of the oarsmen take a rest as they float down the river. In other words, the river is strong enough to let them float down without having to do any rowing. The most arresting thing is the mist that's rising from the river, suggesting the morning. And Bingham, as I said, proved very, very, very masterful at this there. And you can see how that hazes out the background so beautifully. Okay? Next, please. This one, of course, I'm sure you've seen it, or you have, or gone to the Met and seen it, where it is in the Metropolitan. Fur traders descending the Mississippi in 1845. It is considered a masterpiece of American genre. Now, when you look at this, does it not remind you of the eel spearing in Setauket, with everything not magnified, but everything showing in the water what is in the boat? So it reminds me very much of that. Now, it was originally titled French Trader, Half-Breed Son. But the title was changed at a New York exhibition because it was done for a New York audience. They appear to float by us as they observe us. It's a quiet, calm river situation, and all we hear is the gentle sound of the oar. Now, this black figure is not a cat. It looks like a cat, but it's not. It's actually a bear cub that was chained there. So this little boy had a bear cub to play around with. I'm sure that once the got a little too large, they had to let him go. But the bear is there, and you can see he's chained, so he won't fall into the water. And so this is a parallel from between this and Mount's eel spearing. These works are not Luminist, but they show interest in Luminism, all right? We see the beginnings of Luminism. The rising mist and the reflection of the rippling water. And you can see the ripples of the water, all right? You can obviously see them. Luminism was a term coined by John Bauer, a 20th century art historian. Meticulous renderings of all objects appear in the painting. Stillness prevails, and the scene is flooded with noon sunlight. This, I would say, would be morning sunlight, okay? But as we get into Luminism, you're going to see an awful lot of light flooding the painting. Now, we're going to start talking about Frederick Church. Church was born in Hartford, Connecticut. His father was a banker and a jeweler, and he asked Daniel Wadsworth to intercede with Thomas Cole to take Church as a pupil from 1844 to 1846. Cole said of Church, he is the finest eye for drawing in the world, which was quite a compliment, okay? In New York City, there was a synthesis of views from various locales, and the information influenced by the writings of a German man named von Humboldt, who was a naturalist and an explorer. In fact, the Humboldt Current is named for him, okay? He was the one who implored artists to go to South America. So that's what Frederick Church did. He went to Colombia in 1853, and in 1857 to Ecuador, and in 1859 a sketching trip to Labrador and Greenland, and because he wanted to paint the icebergs. In 1867, he was very successful, by the way. In 1867, after losing 2 of his children to diphtheria, his wife was very depressed. And so he and she went to the Holy Land and Rome and Athens, where he could then, again, absorb some art. In 1874, he built for his wife a mansion which is called Olana in New York State on the Hudson River, all right? It is a Persian-influenced castle on the Hudson for his wife, where they also had 4 more children. He died in 1900, almost totally forgotten, and the Metropolitan Museum mounted a retrospective of his work because he had been a trustee of the Met. So today, as you well know, Olana is, I believe, owned by the national U.S. government, and you can go there and see many of his works that are hung there. Now let's look at one of his. All right, there's Frederick Church's picture. Okay, now here is Church, The Twilight Among the Mountains in 1845, done at the age of 19. Okay, right after he was taken in with Thomas Cole. One can see the skill with the color and the light. This painting from 1845 was his professional debut at the National Academy of Design. Next, please. All right, Church, Morning Looking East, 1848. We see a very low horizon line, all right? The sun is rising, and the figures are very small in relation to the painting itself. There are some figures, if I'm not mistaken, right here. Okay, you see that? In all of these paintings, man is always the small figure next to the grandeur which God created. All right. Now, also, you've got to remember, too, that about this time, there was something we called the manifest destiny, where it was our destiny to go beyond the Mississippi River and go to and spread our country to the Pacific Ocean. And we know how hard that was, okay, because of the Indians rightly felt that the land was theirs. They had been pushed out of the East Coast, so whatever land they had was their hunting space. Now, this painting has a low horizon sun, and the figures, as I said, are very small to the grandeur of the mountains and sky. This is the Hudson River from the Catskill Mountains. From Cole, he got reverence for nature and as an expression of noble and lofty ideas. Next, please. Cotopaxi. Well, this was done in 1855 in the Andes near Quito, Ecuador. Now you see, with these paintings, they all look the same size. But I'm going to tell you that many of these paintings, some that I'm going to show you now, are going to be much, much larger than what you see on the screen here, okay? Now, this volcano is 14 miles across at the base and is, according to my research, 19,347 feet tall in the Pacific Ring of Fire. However, the Cotopaxi has not erupted since 1940. That was the last time it erupted, all right? This is an equatorial glacier. Starting at 16,000 feet, it becomes a glacier because it's so cold. Now, and we can see horizontal slabs of color. Look at the bottom, and you see two. I think I'm going to have to step off here to show this to you. we see two slabs of yellow and yellow-greenish, and a little tiny village with some figures. This looks perhaps this looks like a church. I'm not quite sure, but these little figures going to church, and it shows here that that it was still smoking in those days. Okay, but volcanoes do that. They let off a lot of smoke. All right. But you see, it's all these slabs of color. And here we have a slab of color, which is actually a blend of blue and probably some purple as well. And the sky, and we see a cloud here. Now the cloud is low hanging, and if the cloud moves, it's going to go cover the top of the volcano. But again, he went that far to do this painting, and I'm going to show you some others that he also did. Now, let's go to the next. The next was Niagara Falls in 1857. Nature Unsullied illustrates his faith in, quote, America's sacred destiny, which of course was to move out to the Pacific. The panoramic view and the sense of mystery with the awesome force of nature and all that water coming down, okay? Nature untouched by man, but blessed by God. Now, this painting is 7 feet across, okay? So, again, I'm telling you that many of these paintings, the ones that we saw with Edmonds and Mount, would be much smaller. But paintings like this, to get the majesty and the grandeur, they have to be very wide. How many of you have seen Lutz's Washington crossing the Delaware at the Metropolitan? How many of you have actually seen it in real life? All right, so you know how huge it is. You know, and they recently built the most beautiful frame for it. And it is in a place of honor at the Metropolitan. Again, reflecting our past. Now, the next one I'm going to show you. Next, please. El Rio de Luz, the River of Light, in 1857. This was down in what I'm trying to figure out what. Well, it must have been maybe in Brazil. I don't have the place here. But the mist rises from the water as the day dawns. There is meticulous attention to detail. You can count every leaf on those trees, okay? Now, there is the rising light forms, in a sense, a cross in the middle of the painting. Because if you look, you see this, and then you see this right here. It almost forms a cross, doesn't it? Okay? And all of this is not an orchid, by the way. I looked at it with a magnifying glass. I said, that may be an orchid, but it's not. It's not an orchid, okay? It's just a plant there. But there were, as you well know, orchids in South America. So, and all of this, and some of these, there's a tree trunk that's fallen over. But it's left there because, as you will know, it will rot and eventually go back into the soil from whence it came. So, and again, we see this beautiful light here. Now, the next one, please. This one is called Autumn from 1857. We see a kind of a zigzag shoreline, 2 parts in light, 2 parts fading into the shadow. It's peaceful and it's still. The Luminists usually, as I said, had a river or a lake in their works, with the mist acting as a filter for the color changes. The reflections are magical, and they add a sense of otherworldliness. Man does not impinge himself upon this nature. You don't go near it. You don't change it. You leave it the way it is. And I think the way the trees just embrace that all that light in the middle, and we can see that it may be autumn that's coming, because as you can see, many of the leaves are turning red, and you can pick up the leaves there, and it just very, very graceful, rises very gracefully. The next one, please. Now this one, the Heart of the Andes. This painting is 10 feet wide. And how many of you have seen it at the Met? All right, you have seen it, okay. He himself designed the frame for it, And he did this on his second trip to South America in 1857, and it was finished, dated 1859. 9 weeks of travel and sketching resulted in elements from many sketches in this work. In 1859, it was shown at the Lyric Hall, probably in New York City, lit by gas jets of all things. Gaslight. In the 1850s, I mean, this was really something when people were still using the little oil lamps. Now, with the gas jets with 7 silver reflectors to reflect the light. And it was really quite astonishing to a group of the people that went to see it, because they'd never seen anything like it. Now, 13,000 people in New York City paid 25 cents to file by. Now, 25 cents, wait, we laugh at it, but that was a lot of money then. You could probably buy well, I don't know what you could buy, but certainly much more than you can today, okay? You can't even buy two postage stamps for 25 cents today. So anyway, pay that. Then it was sent to London. After they finished it here, I believe it was shown for about 5 or 6 weeks. And then it was sent to London, where it had great success. As I told you, it's a 10 feet wide painting set in a very elaborate frame with microscope attention to detail of every leaf and twig. Now I'm going to note for you, if you haven't already noticed it, a small shrine in the lower left. Now the color hazes to blue and violet in the distance, but the details are still done with precision. And here is where the little, let me see if I can find it. Wait a minute. Here it is. You see this right here? It's a little tiny, and I believe there's one person there. It's a little tiny shrine with one person there. But you actually got lost. I mean, how many of you did pick up on that? No, because there's so much there, you know, and this is so tiny. But when you go to the museum at the Met, first of all, there's a long bench you could sit down, all right, because you really want to look at this painting, and you can see all the details. And it's much more much sharper in real life than it is here, okay? But if you haven't seen it, you really should go. And also go to see Lutz's Washington Crossing the Delaware, because it's another one of these enormous paintings. Now, okay. Now the next one, please. This is called Twilight in the Wilderness. This is Mount Katahdin in Maine. He had visited it, this is from 1860. He had visited it two years before, and it shows great technical skill, and he exhibited it for 7 weeks in a gallery all by itself. Church liked exhibiting his works individually, because this way your attention wouldn't be drawn to something else, all right? All right, now I have another painting, the last painting of his that I'm going to show you. Next, please. This is called Our Banner in the Sky from 1861. Now you know what's happened, what caused this, okay? In May 18th of 1861, the New York Tribune wrote in the newspaper, Mr. Church has been painting a symbolic landscape embodying the stars and stripes. It is an evening scene with long lines of red and gold typifying the stripes, and a patch of blue sky with dimly lit twinkling stars in the corner. But as you see, the flag is in tatters, so is the nation. It dominates a barren landscape looking very much like the landscape of the fires in California, doesn't it? All right. The miraculous appearance of our nation's symbol was meant to elevate and to give hope that right would win out. Now I have a few more to show you of paintings during the Civil War. Next, please. Now, this is a picture of Eastman Johnson. He was born this is from 1863, okay? He was born in Maine, and his family moved to Washington, D.C. in 1845 because his father was a clerk in the Navy. And so he began doing portraits in Maine and also portraits of U.S. senators. In 1849, he had a formal training beginning in Dusseldorf, with none other than Emanuel Lutze, who did the George Washington crossing the Delaware, okay? Now, in 1851, he went to Holland and was for 4 years the court painter to the Prince William III. In 1855, he went to Paris. All budding artists want to go to Paris. And he went to the studio of Thomas Couture, who was the big, the biggie teacher there. And that's also where, by the way, Manet went for his training, okay? And then he returned to the U.S., a successful genre and portrait painter to wealthy New York families. He also took a sojourn to the West, and this was very unusual, where he painted the Indian tribes and the Indian chiefs. He painted a number of them. Okay, now go to the next, please. This is called Negro Life in the South. It says at the South, all right. This is also known as Old Kentucky Home. This was also exhibited at the National Academy of Design, but it's set in the urban yards of Washington, D.C. Johnson's sister poses at the doorway. Okay, his sister is right there at the doorway. There are black people of varying shades hinting at the relationship to a white father. The blacks here are shown in an idealized setting. There is no hint of the horrors of slavery, and it implies the benevolence of the white owners. Now, I think this was a little bit, shall we say, doctored up, if you know what I mean. It's an upper-class home, or a nice home, and it indicates that the benevolence of the white owners. Now, much has been written about this work. We see it through 21st century eyes. Remember, Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852 sold 300,000 copies in this country. When it went to England, they sold 1 million copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin. All right? All right, next, please. Now, here is another Johnson genre painting, Christmas Time, the Blodgett Family from 1864. The family portraits such as these are generally called conversation pieces. The father stands guard over the family as the mother watches the children at play. It's a cozy setting. There is light coming in the window. You can see some lovely urns there. You can also see that they have a rug on the floor, which, again, elevates their social status, and the emphasis on a loving family together at Christmas was, of course, idealized because this was still during the Civil War, and there were not many fathers at home with their children. All right, the next one, please. This is Writing to Father. And we see, now, again, Johnson was trained in Dusseldorf, okay, as I told you, where he learned to do genre paintings like this. Johnson adopted the genre style to American art. Here is a little boy. My goodness, his chin is just about above the table, okay, laboriously writing a letter to his daddy. Now, the father was obviously fighting somewhere, okay, and it was a sentimentality that appealed to the Victorians. Many paintings like this were very popular because during the Civil War there was so much grief. All right, the next one, please. Now, this is the letter home. Again, in 1867, I'm sorry. This is 2 years after the war. There is a Civil War theme of an encampment with a soldier riding home. The cot is outside to give him fresh air. One wonders if he is getting better. This must have evoked sad memories for those who received a last letter from a loved one. Next, please, and this will be my final picture. Johnson's The Girl I Left Behind Me from 1867, another one from the same year. The young lady stands on a promontory. It's obviously very cold because her dress is being whipped up and she's got a shawl on. and she's looking out. Her hair is, again, you could see the wind, and she's looking out, just looking for somebody perhaps that's never going to come back. This was a very popular painting after the Civil War. And I'm going to read something to you, okay? You may have heard this if you saw Ken Burns's Civil War that was on Channel 13, the entire. And I'm going to read this to you. It was read in Ken Burns's painting, and not the painting, in Ken Burns's series. It's the man's name was Sullivan Ballou. He was from Rhode Island, a volunteer major. And on July 7th, 1861, this is what he wrote to his wife, and it's very difficult to hear this, okay? I know how great is the debt we owe to those who went before us through the blood and suffering of the Revolution, and I am willing, perfectly willing, to lay down all my joys in this life to help maintain this government and to pay back that debt. Sarah, my love for you is deathless. It seems to bind me with mighty cables. If I do not return, my dear Sarah, never forget how much I loved you, nor that when my last breath escapes me on the battlefield, it will whisper your name. But, oh, Sarah, if the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they love, I shall always be with you in the brightest day and the darkest night. And when the soft breeze fans your cheek, it shall be my breath, or the cool air your throbbing temple, it shall be my spirit passing. Major Ballou wrote the letter on July 7th. On July 14th, he was wounded at the Battle of Bull Run. There were 2 battles of Bull Run, remember? And he died a week later. Sarah and her 2 surviving sons, Sarah had they had 2 children already. Sarah lived until 1917, and she never married again. Thank you so much for your attention.